one of the works that you took a look at was Frankenstein. And this, I never saw this coming. This is what's so creative and innovative about your book. Frankenstein, the way you studied it and the way you see it, is basically a story about the usurpation of the power of women. That they made a man without a mother. The science eliminated the principle of femininity from the creation of human life. This is so interesting to me, because to me, this dovetails with what we're talking about. Because, you know, the next question in the discussion of our gender discussion is, who cares? Relax. If somebody wants to say they're a tree, they're a tree. Like, what does it bother you that some guy suddenly says, you know what, I think I'm a woman? Or some woman says, you know what, I think I'm a man. I'm going to live my life like that. What do you care? And you make the case kind of through the examination of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and other works here, advertently or not, that it does matter.
It matters incredibly. I mean, beginning with the question of your inner life. I mean, this is what you lose when you lose your faith, is you lose the sense that your inner life means anything. So we've come to a place where either people think your inner life doesn't mean anything, that your morals are as good as my morals and your culture is as good as my culture, or they think it means everything. You can change your sex on the spot. Well, one of the people dealing with these questions was Mary Shelley, who was a teenage girl. She had run away with the poet Shelley. He had left his wife for her. Shelley, both Mary Shelley's mother, who was one of the first feminists, her father, Shelley himself, they all believed in free love and they all despised marriage. And as a result of this, Mary Shelley got pregnant several times, lost her children. Nobody felt much sympathy for her when her children died. Byron was sleeping with everybody, man and woman. And so she conceived of this horror story about a man who creates a creature out of old body parts, basically, and brings it to life. And she herself said, this is a story about what happens when man usurps the rights of God to create life. And I point out in the book, it's really not, because man creates life all the time. Men and women create life all the time out of the materials they have. What Frankenstein does is he creates a creature without a woman, and he takes away the power of women. And this is all throughout the book. Frankenstein becomes a monster because he has no parents. He has no one to love him, to teach him how to be a human being. He hides out. The monster Frankenstein hides out at one point with a family, and all he can do is drink in what it means to watch a mother raise her children, to watch a father take care of his wife and his family. And he ultimately, the monster comes back to Dr. Frankenstein and says, I will leave you alone if you will just do one thing, build me an Eve. You made an Adam, now build me an Eve so I can become a complete human being. This has become, Mary Shelley, like I said, she was a teenage girl when she wrote this. She invented the modern science fiction genre. And this is a theme in science fiction to this day. When you watch the stories about dystopia, when you watch stories like The Matrix about machines taking over the world, the first thing to go is the woman. When you think about Aldous Huxley's
you watch a Disney
Brave New
movie. Andrew, watch a Disney movie. This is a running joke in our family. They kill off the mother in virtually all these. Before we got to Disney's current craziness, we had the mother being killed off. I mean, Bambi's the most famous or infamous.
Right.
But I mean, every other Disney movie, the mom's dead within the first two scenes.
This is it, because how do you find your humanity then? If you live in a world, in Brave New World, the dystopian novel, the first thing they do is they raise children in incubators and they get rid of mothers. And The Giver, which is also a famous dystopian novel, they relegate motherhood to the lowest women in the society. If you watch The Terminator, when the machines want to destroy the rebel leader, what do? They go back and hunt in time and hunt for his mother, who's in the first movie, she's just a girl. She's just a girl who wants to date and talk about her hair, but her power is that she becomes a mother. And the poets wrote about this so beautifully. Wordsworth, especially, who lost his mother young, wrote in his autobiographical poem, he wrote about how a mother, in communicating with her baby, turns that baby into a human being and connects that baby to the world through her love. This turns out to be a scientific fact. I mean, babies are born with what's called motor neurons. When they're born, they're really not distinguished in their own minds from their mother. They're really actually still connected to their mother, even though they're outside the womb. It's in that interchange between the mother and the child that those motor neurons come to life, that the child realizes himself as an individual and as a creative person and can go forth on his own. This is a spiritual task of motherhood that we don't think about. I do not believe. I know we're all supposed to say, oh, men can do this too. No, they can't. It's actually a special task. And I think it is a task best performed by the person who gave birth to that child, even though sometimes we have to make do in this tragic life without that. This means that when somebody says to you, oh, she's just a homemaker, she's just a mom, she's a stay-at-home mom, and relegates that to a second tier, they're actually relegating the most important task a person can do to the second tier of our business, which means that a woman who goes in and types words into a computer or shuffles paper or goes to get coffee for her boss or even is the boss is actually not doing something more important than the woman who is raising that child to be a full soul. And I don't say this in a condescending way. One of the reasons that feminism became a thing at this moment, one of the reasons Mary Shelley's mother was one of the first feminists, is because if you look back at the Bible, Megyn, you look back at Proverbs 31, Christians are always talking about, oh, I want a Proverbs 31 woman. Proverbs 31 is the description of the best woman, the virtuous woman. It's not a description of some 50s housewife, vacuuming in her heels. It's a description of a businesswoman who buys land, of somebody who plants an orchard, who sells the fruit of that orchard, and then also has time to feed her family and take care of her home and make her husband proud and give her husband honor through her behavior. That's a very extensive thing. When the Industrial Revolution came along, which is right around the time I'm talking about in this book, when the Industrial Revolution came along, all of those home industries were taken away from women. Suddenly clothes, women used to be called the distaff because they made the clothes, which was a major, major industry. Suddenly clothes were going to be made in factories. Suddenly food was manufactured off the farm. Suddenly children were taken off to the cities to work in factories and didn't come back to help on the farm. So even the children that women were producing weren't as valuable as they used to be. And I'm just talking about economics, but it was just true. What you had after that was a kind of idealization of women. You had this kind of idea that was big in the Victorian age of the angel in the house. And a woman was an angel in the house. And women weren't people anymore. They were kind of these high goddesses of domesticity, the domestic goddess, as we joke today. Well, no wonder feminists started saying, I'm really a human being. I would like to have an important place in my society. If you've stripped away my home industries, if you've stripped away the economic value of what I do, all I'm left now is as a dependent, as we say in the tax business. What is my value? I want to have value like men have value. So that's why Mary Shelley, I think at this moment, actually perceived that something was happening, that machinery and science were actually antithetical to the spiritual task of womanhood. I personally, when you talk about me being hopeful, one of the things I'm hopeful about is that computers have brought back home industries, have made it easier to run a business out of your home, and that women will start to discover. I think some of them started to discover during this pandemic and its lockdowns that they're needed. They're needed by their children. You don't just create a child in a moment when you go into labor. As you know, you create a child in every moment that you're with that child, and every moment that that child sees his mother's love or her mother's love in her eyes. So, what Mary Shelley perceived was that science, which was then and still now was largely a masculine pursuit, was somehow undermining the position of women in the world, the essential position of women in the world. And it continues to do that. I mean, who can deny that soon babies can be born out of a machine? They probably will be born out of a machine. Who will be the woman wise enough to say, you know what, it's painful to have labor, but actually it's necessary that I have this connection to my child, that this child grows under my heart. That's going to be probably the fewer women who actually say that, but they're going to be the most important women in the world. So I just think these, poets aren't prophets, writers aren't prophets, but if they observe the world they're in closely enough, it actually will tell you where the world is going. And I think Mary Shelley was a seer. I think Frankenstein is not just the source of great horror movies and great jokes and great imitations like the Mel Brooks Young Frankenstein. It is also one of the wisest books of Gothic horror ever written, and an absolute work of genius.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.